This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. We gotta be talking about taxes.
Yes.
That's it, taxes, taxes, taxes. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Government used to have a lot of power to extract wealth in the form of taxes and then be able to use that wealth for the betterment of the society as a whole. But what's happened now is that we have given more power to corporations to control their wealth and to take it out of the tax system.
So what happens as a result of that? First of all, companies and rich people get a lot richer, not paying those taxes you might have been paying. Second thing that happens is the government has less money. The government's capacity is sort of contracted. And then social problems start to grow, in part because the government has less money. Now, with that background, rich people step onto the scene and say, oh my gosh, this is a shame. This situation we see here is a shame. We got all these social problems, and government, my gosh. The government should be solving this stuff, but it isn't. That is embarrassing. Well, I'm happy to solve these problems, but of course, when we do solve it, we're gonna do it my way. We're gonna privatize the solution.
The privertizers' blueprint, often also called starve the beast. You create a crisis of confidence.
How much money do we need to be investing right now in the United States in water infrastructure?
By 2020, 44% of all water infrastructure in the United States will be classified as poor, very poor, or beyond life.
You deny resources for quality public services.
In the 1970s, there were a lot of pools of free federal money. That has really, no pun, dried up.
And lo and behold, the answer is privatization.
What we believe is that private industry is part of the answer, which is very consistent with what the president's plan is.
American Water Works is one of the world's largest water corporations. It takes over public water systems and runs them for profit. And around the world, there are many other companies doing the same thing.
It's an absolutely terrifying notion, privatization of water. Moving in exactly the wrong direction, access to potable, clean drinking water is a fundamental human right. It's just insidious that the corporate mind could even conceive or imagine the notion of privatizing it.
Corporations have figured out that there are really big business opportunities in these public sectors, in part because they've been walled off from corporate influence in the past.
The private sector is voracious in seeking to privatize almost everything.
First, privatize government services as much as possible, and also the seizure and the commodification of the public commons, your parks, your public schools, your streets. How can we get more money out of the public commons?
The for-profit motivation is always a very bad reason for providing public services. There's a conflict of interest between whether you're going to pay off the shareholders or whether you're going to invest in the public system. Many responsibilities and obligations must be public in order to maintain equal access to the basic necessities of life. A healthy democratic society has a thriving private sector and also a thriving public sector. And as we permit the private sector to encroach upon and to literally absorb the responsibilities and obligations of a democratic society, we lose our democracy.
And the rise of big tech corporations is now accelerating this process. For example, in schools. Not only in Africa, but elsewhere too.
Corporations have decided that they should remake education. by using technology. They want to have teacherless classrooms. But the teacher is the single most important and expensive part of education. In the tech industry's dream, if the teacher is removed from the equation, then you can cut costs dramatically.
These companies monopolize everything. First of all, monopolize their sector, and the next thing is to look where's left. These giant corporations are frantically searching for new sources of profit because it's drying up. They say, we need to take the education system, take the healthcare system, take the transport system, and own it, or we die.
Silicon Valley is the new Rome of our time. The Valley has become this extraordinary power center that has a huge say over what kind of media and information we have in a democracy, over, frankly, how many of our biggest problems are solved, over how election campaigns are run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Technology is neutral, and in many ways it's great. But there's a difference between the technology and allowing a few powerful players to manipulate it for their own ends. So we've gone from this wide open world that opened up all of these possibilities for people to create things, to share information, to share ideas, and it has collapsed into these walled gardens that are controlled by a few very powerful players.
We're seeing Amazon, for example, gobbling up every kind of business in sight. They're interested in getting into pharmaceuticals, and they're making a big move into food.
They capture about half of everything that Americans spend online. And they're growing into all these different directions. They control 35% of the world's cloud computing capacity. They're building out shipping and logistics infrastructure that is scaled to take on the Postal Service and UPS. And increasingly, they are the intermediary for all of our smart devices. Alexa, their voice system, is 70% of the market. And on it goes. They're making investments in finance, in healthcare, hit movies and television shows. Amazon is increasingly setting the rules for what happens in its marketplace and pretending like that's a real market, but of course it's not. That's a direct threat to democracy, a very fundamental threat to democracy.
Though elected by no one, corporations are now starting to be treated like governments.
We're joined now live by the world's first ever tech ambassador. Can I start simply by asking you, what exactly does a tech ambassador do?
Well, we're basically trying to treat the technology and the tech companies in a way which is similar to the way we treat a bilateral relationship with countries all over the world. The value of their stocks is more or less the same as the GDP of France. And we think that that is being translated into influence over political affairs. We think it is necessary to treat them in a way which is similar to the way we treat other countries.
A lot of folks in the Valley believe that the companies they are building are kind of replacements of government. I think if we don't push back against the kind of agenda that these companies have, we're going to live in a world in which they are governing us privately through the profit motive, but governing us.